The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. We are back. Lovin' baseball when we were 12 and innocent. I'm Ralph Tycho with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and my guest is very special to me. He is one of the main baseball contributors on the Facebook network, and a Met fan, and coincidentally was age 12 when my Mets went to the World Series against Nancy Finley's A's, and it was a great year. And Stan Phillips, tell me a little bit about you and what was baseball like when you were 12, and how the Mets affected you, and how baseball in general affected you.
Well, I think at age 12, I had reached my peak of baseball obsession. When school let out in the summertime, I played it all the time during the day, and I followed the Mets religiously. Even had the opportunity to go to games with my dad, probably about maybe 10 or 12 games in 73, but I lived and died with everything Mets in 73. It was a heartbreaking start. I didn't think they were going to go anywhere, but I was so young and innocent, it didn't bother me. I loved them whether they won or lost. And my main hero on that team, and in baseball in general, was Tom Seaver. And I could tell you back then, every performance that he had on the mound from 73 onwards at that point, I was obsessed with Tom. And the fact that they actually won the pennant, I was going back to school in September, I couldn't wait to get home, and I was able to stay up at night and watch those games on WOR, which was basically the lifeblood of every Met fan back then. They televised almost every game except maybe Wednesday day games, and then went to San Diego. So the opportunity was there to see every Met game when you were age 12 in 1973, and I think I took advantage of almost every one. But it was so exciting, and it was also the year that Willie was retiring. So there was so much going on in the month of September, and that parlayed itself into the division series with the Reds. And we all know what happened with Pete Rose and Buddy Harrelson. And Pete Rose and the Reds were the big red machine that year. No one gave us a chance, but that didn't stop me from rooting them on. And I thought we were going to carry it all the way to Oakland. But we did to a certain extent. We just couldn't seal the deal. But nonetheless, it was probably the highlight of my baseball fandom, being age 12 and following the Mets in 73. I mean, to this day, I can tell you every player on that team and go right through all the fantastic memories I had. I can't tell you what happened last year with the Mets, and I watch every game. It just doesn't have the emotional significance it did back in 73 for me. So it's ironic that this topic is age 12, because to me, that's when I became a baseball fan for the rest of my life. I played it and everything when I was 9, 10, 11, but 12, I just became obsessed. Then I started to get in the game Stratomatic, started subscribing to the sporting news. My parents would get the sporting news for me. I couldn't wait till Friday to come. I'd get the sporting news in the mail, and I'd obsess over all the box. That's the only way you could really get the box scores and statistics at that point. And I'd obsess over everything. So that's a magical year for me, 73 and being age 12.
Beautiful. And as my audience knows, who is those of them who have followed this series, Lovin' Baseball, when we were 12, I didn't just come up with that it was by design. Age 12 is when your enthusiasm for the game meets your intellect. And at age 12, you not only were a fan, but you were a knowledgeable fan. And this is my 46th interview on this topic, and I plan to make it my next book. I've never had a topic that has enthused more listeners, and I've never had a topic that has enthused more guests. And where did that take you? That's what I want to know in the baseball world. Age 12, they had this terrific year. And after that, it kind of went what I call the Bruce Beauclair years. After that. And
yeah.
there was mediocrity all over the place. But, you know, when you're a Mets fan, you take the good with the bad. And I was an original Met fan when they were horrible. And I mean horrible. Stories, they're very well written about those years. There were some terrific books. Jimmy Breslin wrote a book. Durso, Leonard Coppett wrote what I consider to be the Bible of the Mets. And
yeah, they were all New York beat writers too. So
right, exactly.
They lived and died with the team.
Where did you grow up in New York?
I did not grow up in New York. I grew up in Central Jersey, Carteret, and that was probably about 20-some miles from the city. So you talk about the 79 Mets, 78 Mets. That was like my junior and senior year in high school, and at that time, my friends and I had the ability to just go to Met games at that point. And you talk about picking the year to go to like almost every game during the summertime. It was the 79 season. That's the year we went to just about every game in June, July, and August. So when you said the Bruce Beauclair years, that really hit a nerve because we were rooting for Bruce Beauclair, Doug Flint, Frank Taveras, Richie Hebner, who couldn't stand being in Flushing, Steve Henderson, the aftermath of the Seaver trade. There was nobody at that ballpark. And to tell you a funny story, we found always ways to get in. We would write a letter to Lorinda DeRoulet, who was the owner of the Mets at the time, and say, oh, we got soda spilled on us. My parents got a flat tire in the parking lot, and they couldn't give the tickets away. So they would always send us complimentary tickets. So half the games we went to, we had seats either in the field or the loge level that were complimentary. So you couldn't pull that off in this day and age. But there was nobody there. There was maybe 5,000 people every game we went to, basically. So it was fun.
In comedy, I did some comedy in the 80s and 90s. They call that papering the house.
Yes. They just wanted bodies in there. That's it.
Right, exactly. And, you know, that's profitable for a team to fill up that way. You go to a game, you buy food, you buy
right.
what my father used to call chazarai, which was basically pig stuff. But, you know, it's all profits to the team. And if the team isn't doing well on the field and not drawing, there's no disgrace in papering the crowd.
Right.
And what do you remember most about Tom Seaver?
What do I remember most about him? As a child or as an adult? I guess we're talking about age 12. I just think he had charisma. And I'll give you a side story about Tom Seaver. When I was 7 years old, I was a Yankee fan because of Mickey Mantle. It's the tail end of his career, and I went to a Yankee game. Well, lo and behold, it was now time to take me to a Met game, and Tom Seaver pitched that night. And from that day on, seeing him in person, live, it was like almost being in Disneyland, being at Chase Stadium, because it was, to me, as an 8-year-old, it was much more colorful and much more vibrant than Yankee Stadium. I guess when I went to Yankee Stadium, they were down in the dumps, and at that point, I guess management really didn't care with the Yankees. But the Mets, it seemed like a more festive atmosphere. And Tom Seaver pitching, and the Mets won that night. And I just became obsessed with Tom and the Mets at that point. For 1 year, I was a Yankee fan. I had a Yankee sweatshirt. That's the only piece of Yankee memorabilia I ever had. And that point on, I never wore anything but Met colors from that point on, after seeing Tom Seaver at Shea. So,
did you ever get to see the Yankees play at Shea when they were rebuilding the original Yankee Stadium?
to be honest with you, I had no desire. I could have went, but it just didn't faze me. The only time I really went to see the Yankees was when they opened up the remodeled Yankee Stadium in '76. I'd go once or twice a year, but I had no desire to see them. Actually, I was probably too young to go on my own at that point, so it wasn't like I was begging to go there. And I only saw the Yankees afterwards because friends of mine, if the Mets weren't home, we would just go to a random Yankee game every now and then, sit in the bleachers just to experience that. So, no, I never did see the Yankees at Shea. I always wonder what it was like, if it was the Yankee Stadium feel or was it just like a transplanted team playing in a different stadium. I couldn't tell you. I wish I knew more about that. I know there's a book out about all the New York teams playing at Shea Stadium at one time, which I still haven't read. I want to get into that. But to answer your question, no, and I never really had a desire at that age. So,
okay. Who in your family took you to the Mets or the Yankees originally? Your first baseball experience?
It was my father, and he's a transplanted Pennsylvanian from Pittsburgh. So when he grew up, he loved the Pirates. But when he came here, he never encouraged me to root for one team or another. Usually it's passed along bloodlines. Either your parents make you root for your team or you follow your father's lead. It just came natural for me. Like I said, the Tom Seaver things. I was originally a Yankee fan. And then because of the fact that you really couldn't see Pirate games, he became a Met fan too. And I think more or less because I was a Met fan too. And that's when he started taking me because he knew how much I loved going. So, yeah, it was basically him until my later teen years. And that's when my friends and I, like I said, we didn't have the best team to go for in my later teen years. The Pat Zachary and Craig Swan era. But,
right.
And believe me, they were good pitchers. So was Skip Lockwood too. But
yeah, I don't know if you saw a post I have a thing on my website where I put they're from the archives, and I've had some terrific interviews with Skip
I saw
Lockwood.
Skip Lockwood, right? Yeah.
Yeah. One of my favorite all-time players because of that. He was the most forthcoming of any player I've ever interviewed, with the possible exception of the 70-odd players that I interviewed pretty well. But Skip, the reason I'm saying that is that Skip would drive in from Connecticut with Tom Seaver. And there was a day when Tom didn't pick him up. Tom didn't pick up Skip. That big trade is the most significant move that the Mets ever made for a number of reasons. Speaking of beat writers, I think the trade was brought on by Dick Young. I think were it not for his influence, Tom Seaver would have spent his entire career with the Mets.
I guess it depends on what interpretation or whose story you're hearing, but it's almost like I've read stories like Dick Young was a plant by M. Donald Grant, almost to like encourage the negativity about Tom Seaver. It was almost like they were in cahoots about that. And Dick Young just played along with it and basically drove him out of town, hit him where it hurts when it came to his wife and stuff like that. And, it wasn't a good era in Met baseball as far as PR. And after all these years, you learn that M. Donald Grant wasn't a saint either. So I'm not saying Tom was either,
M. Donald Grunt after that. That was our nickname for him.
It's funny. I don't mean to interrupt you, but Skip Lockwood, I think he actually came up as a position player. He could play very well at I think he even played a few games at shortstop in the majors too, with another organization, maybe Boston. I can't even remember who it was.
It was the A's. He came up.
And the A's, that's what it was. Yeah.
And I've interviewed Nancy Finley about him and those years, and the Charlie Finley years, and the Carl Finley. She's a daughter of Carl Finley, and a niece of the Finley, Charlie O. But I just want to tell you the joy that I get from listening to Skip Lockwood tell the stories about how that trade affected the Mets. There was some Zachary was a terrific pitcher. He was no Tom Seaver. That's all.
Right.
And Douglas Flynn was an all-star for several years. Very versatile. Could play second, short. He was terrific too. Steve Henderson, Dan Norman came over in that trade.
Well, it's funny. I think Norman and Henderson were considered the prime guys in that trade because they both could hit the daylights out of ball. I think Norman they even had higher expectations for, but Henderson stepped right in, and I think he was maybe second in Rookie of the Year voting when he came to the Mets after the Seaver trade, his first year with the Mets. So, yeah, he had no problem adjusting. Just none of them really lived up to the expectations that were set forth for them. I mean, Doug Flynn was great, Gold Glove second baseman, just couldn't hit. And that's nothing against him. He wasn't even a major part of that deal. And Pat Zachary, unfortunately, I think might have been the Pete Rose game when he had his streak of 38 games, kicked the dugout or something and ended up hurting himself and putting himself on the disabled list. So things just didn't go well, as far as expectations. But all the four ball players were quality, but you just can't replace a franchise player like that. No matter how many quality players you have, Seaver was the franchise, and it took the wind out of the sails for the Mets. And
he was the heart of the team, too. It wasn't just his statistics, but he was so classy and stood the test of time with the Mets. In other words, there is no one that when they talk about Tom Seaver, should he really be? Is DeGrom the best pitcher they've ever had? And all that? No. Tom Seaver will always be the heart. And what's really sad, that statue didn't go up until after he passed.
Yeah. I was actually there. I took a video of that. I was actually got to meet Steve Cohen just standing there, and he's a good guy for the Mets. I don't mean to digress, but that's the best thing the Mets ever got. As far as talk about two polar opposites, Donald Grant and Steve Cohen. Steve Cohen does whatever it takes to win, and it's just
how about the Wilpons?
Make sure that statue was built.
Yeah, and the Wilpons were years of misery. Scrimping on everything, getting ripped off by that
Bernie Madoff.
Bernie Madoff really affected the Wilpons, and they were inept. And what's really sad, I digress again a little bit, is that they still own the rights
to the television network.
Right, and they're having trouble re-signing Keith Hernandez.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be. That's a no-no for the Mets.
Well, that'll come back to haunt them too.
Yeah, as everything that the Wilpons touched for all those years was horrible. But it shows one their mettle. If you could root for a team no matter what.
Despite the owner, right?
That says something about I mean, I'm old enough to remember and was hurt very much when I was 11, 12. The New York Giants moved to San Francisco. I had no idea at the time that I would end up spending my life after the Air Force got me in Northern California. And so it worked out in a way, but as a kid, when your team leaves, it's just horrible. And what can I do?
I always ran that past my head. If the Mets move somewhere else, could I still root for them? That's a tough one. That's a tough one. I the St. Louis Mets. I don't know if I could deal with that.
Right.
It's like they were taken away from you.
I interviewed a fellow, and I can't think of his name right now, and that scares me because that was a good interview. He wrote a book about the original San Francisco Giants, and to me, they were the New York Giants, and I never bought a San Francisco cap, but there was a piece of me that still remained loyal to them. I was a Mets fan, and there was a 5-year period when New Yorkers didn't have anything in the National League, and the Mets came in, and that was wonderful. And I also have memories of the first year in Shea Stadium in 1964. 19 of my buddies from high school played hooky and sat in the right field stands on opening day. Your father's Pittsburgh Pirates, as a matter of fact.
That's when we thought you'll hit the home run, right?
Yes. And I mean, just that feeling of being there on that when they christened the ballpark. It was cookie cutter. It was this, that, and the other thing. But it to a Met fan, and you go out there and freeze your ass off in the with the wind at times. So
especially the upper deck,
right? Right.
And the planes flying overhead. You thought they were going to hit you.
Yeah. Hey, Stan, let me ask you this. What about baseball back then, when you were 11, 12, 19, do you miss? And what about baseball is better now than it was, if anything?
Well, the things that stand out in my childhood was getting the morning paper every day and just looking. The West Coast scores were never in there. You get them from the day before.
Right.
But just looking at the box scores and everything else, and even Sunday paper when all the league averages were up, I couldn't wait to see who did what in games just on the box scores. Now it's instantaneously. You can find it on your phone. But to me, it was something special, the anticipation of getting the paper and just devouring everything that happened in baseball. That was your way of consuming it all. Instead of watching like a highlight show on MLB Network or whatever, that's the way we did it back then. And I kind of miss that. And the other thing I miss is a lot of Wednesday afternoon games when I didn't have any obligations to school or anything, and the games on the weekdays weren't televised. I loved listening to the radio, like Bob Murphy, Lindsey Nelson, and Ralph Kiner. It used to be the weekday games. Now you're going to call me a little bit anal. It was on WNYC, which was I think it was a nonprofit station that would carry the games in the afternoon because the other carriers for the Mets wouldn't do it during the day because they made more money. I think this story was with their other programming. So they went to like free, commercial-free radio on those games. And I would just devour that. And like I would just let my imagination run away with those guys describing it. 'Cause when you're 12, your imagination does run wild. And it was just fun back then. I missed just listening. Some games were just radio only. You couldn't watch it no matter what. I kind of missed that. Not that I wish for that now, but that was one thing that made it special when I was younger. That and the box scores every morning. And now what I like is the accessibility of everything. And as you know, I have two baseball groups on Facebook. So just to be able to correspond and see what other people feel and everything, the feedback. When I was younger, you could really only get it with like your immediate friends and stuff like that, or a rare, like John Sterling had a talk show radio, sports radio show, I should say, on WMCA, but that was it as far as like talk radio and stuff like that. So it was very limited on the scope of who you could talk to about these things outside of your inner circle. But now it's so accessible to hear all these opinions. And sometimes you don't want to hear all these opinions because everyone goes on a soapbox and starts preaching. But the fact that it's so accessible now and there's so much more information out there, I do like that.
And they've got MLB where you could literally, for a small amount of money, it isn't that much money, you can hear on the radio and or television virtually every game played in the majors.
Yeah, and I actually subscribe to that, so it's a beautiful thing.
It is. It's decadent, and I love it. What about today's game is better than we grew up watching?
What's better about it? I think the athletes are better, like the pitching. I don't recall so many pitchers able to throw the ball past hitters like they do now. Does that make them better pitchers? I'm not sure. What else is better is just the technology involved, like watching a game on television. To me, going to the ballpark, you cannot capture the pitcher batter like you can on high definition TV, and that's the key to every game. Going to a ballpark is fun because it's the atmosphere of being there and being part of the experience. But if you really want to see the confrontation between the pitcher and the batter, I mean, you can basically see the nose hairs on a pitcher or batter these days. But just the fact that you can follow the flight of the ball and where it's going and the instant replays, you really don't miss a thing with the way technology is in baseball today. So if you look at broadcasts from like the 50s and 60s or whatever, you could say you're probably better off going to the game than watching the way they covered the game back then. But now technology is so far advanced, it's unbelievable. It puts you right in the position of either the batter or the pitcher, and you can't beat it. So technology as far as broadcasting a television game is what makes me marvel at baseball today.
How about the rule changes? Runner on second, this, that, and the other thing. How does that affect your enjoying the game?
Well, I will say this. It was, when you go to a game, and I go to about maybe 20 games a year, and every game is 3.5 hours, I don't necessarily think you want to sit there for another 2 hours to watch another 4 or 5 innings. That being said, I'd rather see a natural ending to the game. If I have to leave in the 10th inning or whatever, I'd rather leave and find out who won when I got home. I really don't like the runner at second base because to me that dilutes everything subliminally as far as like statistics. So a runner comes up, gets an RBI, and the guy on second gets credited with a run scored when he actually made the last out of the last inning. So for a purist, I don't like that aspect of it because it's not a true statistic when you score a run. I mean, that's nitpicking. But I can see it.
No, it's not. It bastardizes the rule book.
Right.
Pure.
Yeah, I agree with that part. But I just think baseball is meant to be to the end of conclusion, whether it's 9 innings or 20 innings or 25 innings. Now, I get it, the fact that the way they use pitchers these days, they run out of pitchers. But sometimes you have to have a pitcher that takes it for the team and pitches 9 innings who's the 10th man on the roster. That's the way the game was meant to be played. And, those things are going to happen during the course of a year. So sometimes you have to deal with it. So I think Gaylord Perry actually pitched like 9 innings in relief against the Mets in one of the longest games in Met history in relief. So it can be done.
I think Gaylord Perry really started his reputation. He was taught to spitball or whatever, and it was solidified against the Mets on that night.
Yeah.
A very underrated pitcher when it comes to statistics and 300 plus games, this, that, and the other thing. Yeah, good memories. Hey, Stan, I really enjoyed your company on this one.
No, and if you ever need me to pop on any other one, or I enjoy the conversation. I could talk for hours, and believe me, if you didn't shut up, I would. But anytime you want to talk again, I'd be glad to. I really enjoyed it.
Beautiful. That's really feels good to a podcaster podcasters look for guests like you who want to talk, who enjoy it. And I'm thrilled. I put a voice to your writings with this, and it's been terrific. And I will take you up on that. And when there's a topic that I think you might be interested in, and in turn, if there's anything you want to talk about, give me a call and we'll get you on.
Well, let me make a shameless plug. I have a podcast myself called New York Mets Baseball Way of Life, which I'll be resuming probably in the next week. I did it every day just about during the season last year. And I'd love to have you on a guest to share some of your Met experiences and memories.
Wow. I'm honored. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
All right. Be well. Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, loving baseball when we were 12 and innocent. And the guest is, can I call you Stash?
Yeah. I've been called a lot worse. You mean Stash, or you can call me Stash. I think you're Keith Hernandez when you call me Stash.
I pronounce that wrong. Stash, like in Stan Musial. That's who I think of.
Yeah, it's Stash. When you said Stash, I said, what, do you think I'm Keith Hernandez?
Well, that's another topic for another day on another podcast with another interviewer. But by the way, my kid's name, my grandfather was Phil, and I named my son Philip with 2 L's. So whenever I read you, I think of Stan Musial, who was everybody's hero. Absolutely, no one didn't worship Stan Musial when I grew up. And what's really sad, they call him underrated now. He doesn't get.
I actually do too. I did a post on that in my baseball Facebook group. I'll plug that here too. Baseball Way of Life. Right. So I said K-Line and Musial are the 2 most underrated players. No one even talks about him anymore.
Let me ask you this: who was your favorite announcer in those years?
My favorite, as growing up?
Yeah.
Probably Bob Murphy.
Okay. All right. Mine was Phil Rizzuto. Even though
they were so humorous. I mean, it was just fun watching the Yankees back in those days. And to be honest, I became a big Bill White fan because of those broadcasts. And I didn't realize as a kid how much he did for the game of baseball. But talk about another book. There's a good book out about him.
An original New York Giant. Went in the service and ended up being traded because the Giants were bringing up Cepeda. And
that's true.
A few years later. So, who had a terrific career with the Cardinals, later the Phillies, and not only a broadcaster, but he was president of the National League back then.
He did it all. He did it all, and he saved the Giants from moving to St. Petersburg.
I know that. And So, and the reason being was the way he and other blacks were treated in St. Petersburg when they went down for spring training. And
it was brutal, I know.
yeah, and when it came time to approving the Giants moving, he said, "Over my dead body." And and Giants ended up with a jewel of a stadium.
It's amazing. It just goes to show you the right location and a good ball club, any city could be successful. That's why I still say don't give up on Tampa Bay. They need to straighten that crap out, and they'll have people come out.
Yes.
Well, maybe not. Miami's the only place that's an enigma. I don't think they'll ever draw in Miami.
Well, I wonder what Florida is like. My mother spent her last few years there, and I visited on occasion, but I really never got enough of a feel for the baseball. I think Miami State spring training, everybody's been used to baseball down there in spring training. And I don't know if Tampa or Miami can get by that. And also day games in the heat.
That's another issue altogether. That's like Texas.
Right. Texas has. I did visited Texas's stadium that preceded this one, and I thought it was terrific. It had a feel of the old Polo Grounds, and they've got the money in Texas. They built another one to keep up with whatever. But let me let you go. I'm up against the time.
Okay,
Stan,
sorry. Like I said, I can talk all day, but we'll do it another time.
Me too. We'll talk another time. Thank you,
all right,
Stan.
Ralph. Thanks again. Thank you.
Stan
Bye-bye.
Phillips. Bye-bye. Stan Phillips, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ralph Tycho, the weak link of it all at Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. And but I do have one skill. I can come up with some damn interesting guests day after day. And this was no exception. Thank you again for being here. And thank you for listening, everybody. I just want to say adios and happy trails.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.